Look, we can disagree with one another, we can debate one another, but we cannot tell the American people that one candidate is a fascist, and if he's elected, it is going to be the end of American democracy.
Except here is Vance's actual running mate saying exactly that.
It's a choice between communism and freedom. This is communist, this is Marxist, this is fascist. This is a radical left Marxist, communist, fascist.
Hi, I'm Ana Marie Cox. This is 90 Days with Ana Marie Cox. It is 45 days to the election. You have a little over 2 weeks to register to vote if you live in a state that's really conservative about that stuff. Also, be sure to check your voter registration. People are being kicked off rolls and without their permission or knowing it. This is a show where we talk about this historic, unprecedented, and wild election ride that we're all on. Smart people come on and talk about it from their unique perspective. And today I have Mo Ryan. She is a TV critic and a contributing editor to Vanity Fair and the author of Burn It Down, Power, Complicity, and a Call for Change in Hollywood. This seems like an unusually good convergence of expertise here to talk about television criticism and this election.
I have so many thoughts, so many thoughts.
Tell us some of them. What's
since-
top of your mind these days?
Well, it comes from you. You reached out, and I was so glad to see that. I followed your work for a long time, and then when you reached out for me to be on this, I was like, yes. But a huge, you were talking about it in terms of the reality show of it all, and obviously Donald Trump was made by reality television. You know, realistically, without The Apprentice, I don't think we get here. I just don't like that. And I watched that happen in real time. And if you want to know one of the professional low points of my entire life, it was Celebrity Apprentice when former Illinois Governor Rod Blagojevich was on. And I was at the Chicago Tribune at the time, and I had to listen to his exit interview. And if you ever wanted to listen to a convicted criminal politician ramble on for, say, I don't know, 2 hours on a conference call with other journalists who you can hear losing the will to live, that was a weird experience. But beyond that, like The Apprentice just was a huge phenomenon and rehabilitated Trump's image. And I think a huge thing that he did so well for so long, spoiler alert, not so much now, was use that reality spoiler, someone who plays the game really well on Survivor or even, The Amazing Race, The Apprentice. We all kind of know what the tropes of that are. He knew how to make good TV. I want to make it very clear to all your listeners. I don't think he's a good person. I don't think he's a good politician. All of his policies I am against. But I'm just saying he employed many, many media manipulation tools that he learned, and really The Apprentice gave him the pathway to take that to a much higher level. And it was also instructive in terms of how people would just decide to give him a pass on basically everything. Because I was working as the TV critic at Variety when he declared his candidacy, and he came down that escalator and started casting around slurs about immigrants and people from Mexico and saying offensive things. And I'll never forget, I actually have written about this multiple times, and I'm screaming into the void with it. NBC Universal at that time issued a press release saying, we believe in the values of,
Yeah, I remember this.
And then literally, I'm not on it, 3 months later, he was hosting SNL. So I'm like, what was that all about? What was that theater all about? It was like we've had a decade now of people going, oh, don't do that. And then they just go along with it or don't stop him.
I want to be kind of extra clear about Trump being able to manipulate these levers of entertainment and use the same skills that he used on Apprentice and Celebrity Apprentice and his entire life. I take him to be more canny than educated.
Absolutely.
I think he's just it's that natural genius, not in the way that he talks about genius, but this ability, like some people are natural, have natural charisma and are natural stars. It's something that can be taught, but I don't think he's learned it.
No, I definitely agree. I think that, again, in service of things I think are reprehensible, goals I think are terrible, he has an unbelievable gift for getting people wound up. And his supporters, he winds them up in the way that they want to be wound up. And what's interesting about he does have natural born instincts of a showman, of a snake oil salesman, whatever you want to call it. He can draw a crowd, he can keep the crowd, he can speak in ways that keeps their interest. And again, he has this ability to make for the dramatic. You know how every reality show, there's always an arc threaded through. He has a feel for the storyline. What
Yeah.
is the storyline? And obviously, producers on various shows helped him, or even all the appearances he made in previous TV and movies. He would kind of have this image as rich guy. He's always had a savvy about how to
Yeah.
use the press, and then Apprentice gave him even more savvy, even more tips. But I agree, he has this incredible instinct for how to go for the jugular, how to get people to pay attention to him.
Let's hear some of your particular expertise and some of the stuff you wrote about in your book about to explain him, which is that one of the problems is that he is a natural extension or a natural kind of part of an ecosystem, an entertainment ecosystem that rewards sexual predators, that rewards discrimination, that rewards or at least isn't punished, right? The incentive structure for white guys is to just keep doing what they're doing, right?
Absolutely, because what people in Hollywood don't want to say, because it makes them feel bad sometimes if they have a soul, which is like, some do. They don't want to say the following thing, which is, we're in business with this person because we think that they can make us money. I think that this person, being in business with them, will help me keep my job, perhaps get a better job, give me money, power, and access, and make the people I work for get what they want, which usually involves more money, more power, more access. So that's the root of everything. The root of everything is these corporations want to make money. So when you see them signing a deal with someone and saying, well, he went to rehab and it's all okay now, I'm like, that's why I researched abusive narcissists and abusive personalities with experts in that for my book, because the vast majority of experts in this arena say these people do not change. Many cannot change. You are not going to send them to a spa in Malibu, give them a self-help book and some scented oils, and they will get better. They don't. And that's why right at the very start of my book, the first chapter, I wrote about how Leslie Moonves, then the CEO of CBS, a very powerful man, in 2016 or 17 said, Donald Trump might not be good for America, but he's good for CBS. And, what do we know about Leslie Moonves? Allegedly, he was also an abusive, predatory, nightmare human being. So there's also this phenomena, which I think both in Hollywood, again, like what makes for a good show, what gets us ratings, what gets us attention, what gets us money and numbers and all that. The same thing happened in the Beltway press, which is, and I think I certainly would never blanket condemn people who cover DC, but a lot of people on the trail of Trump, there's a certain percentage of those people that are what I call horse race hacks. I'm not the only person that called them something like that. But you see this at his press conferences or his appearances. They really just want chum to be thrown in the water, right? They want content that they can use. And what's really interesting about what's happening right now is that in a very reality style twist, Harris has come on the stage. She's not playing the game the same way that Biden was. They knew how to, like the Trump campaign, the people around him They know that the media want to show. They know that no matter how verbally, how much Trump himself or his lackeys castigate the press and insult the press and even potentially put them in danger, they know that there's a large percentage of people who covering the Trump campaign or the Trump world that really want a spectacle. Because I've been a critic for 30 years. You need something to write about, right? Like you have to have content. So that's he gets a pass from Hollywood because he made them money. He made a lot of people really wealthy. He helped a lot of companies bottom line. And in the media spheres, people want content. They want something new to write about. And sort of like the prime time of Trump right after he was elected. I don't even, do we remember? We don't want to, but 2017, 2018, it just felt like a fire hose of stuff happening all the time, and it was bonkers.
And I remember that, my career materially benefited. And then a lot, not as much as other people's. There
Right?
were a lot of journalists whose names people would recognize, who started appearing on TV, who just would specialized in Trump translation, kind of specialized in like what's going on behind the palace intrigue of Trump. And boy, was there a fuck ton of palace intrigue, right?
Yes.
Because it was like a reality show. He is the Omarosa. He hired Omarosa, and he was the Omarosa, right? Like,
there was no shortage of drama, which is
he was
again
an
the
unhinged
engine.
main character of a reality show, and that is it's fascinating. I'm fascinated. People are fascinated. I will read those stories.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, but
Although
well, I was gonna say we developed a myopia, I think, especially let's say like people who consume mainstream media, white, straight, cis people, able-bodied people for whom that was just antics, for whom it was easy to kind of be like antics, and to not think as much about how that chaos, which was really allowing people behind the scenes to make policy, like filtered in. I mean, there were flashpoints for it. I think the Muslim ban. People were like, "Oh shit." After that, during Biden, like we had a flashpoint with Dobbs, but there has been coverage of when it comes to Trump. It's just hard for people, I think, to not cover. They want to cover him and not like
absolutely, and
the stuff that happens because
this
of him.
is something I wrote about in my book as well. Okay, and this relates to both scripted entertainment, reality entertainment, and then the news media itself. I mean, let's not forget that when Me Too was at its height, I think it was Vox. Many publications had this, but Vox was keeping just a running tally of just men in the media accused of serious misconduct.
Oh, yeah.
So a lot of people who ran newsrooms, a lot of people who ran corporations or were in power positions and could greenlight stuff and were assigning coverage, all that, were terrible. Like that's not news, right? So they weren't great. They were somewhat, and then that what that feeds into though is that even people who didn't do anything like that, even people who didn't do anything wrong, so to speak, all of the Trump stuff was theoretical to them. And this is something that, like I've had personal experiences with abusive narcissists. I have researched this topic, and I felt in my bones, as did many other people and many other, people of color. A lot of people were sounding the warning bells in 2016. Like, yeah, I think, I don't know, when Huffington Post for a while, where I used to work, I can't remember how long, because you know how it is in the media. I worked at that place. Did I? They had him under like a humor vertical. Like they didn't think it was
entertainment.
real.
They had him entertainment vertical.
It was entertainment. And it was like, a lot of people were trying to say this is not entertainment, but because the assignment editors, the TV bosses, the people covering the stuff and could make decisions about how the framing of that coverage worked, and the seriousness or the jokiness of the tones of which it was covered, for those people what Trump was saying was so alien. I think there was a certain amount, and certainly with a lot of people, oh, he's just saying that. He's just saying that to be the reality show villain, right? Or to do the heel turn. We couldn't quite believe that he would shatter immediately as many norms as he did and repeatedly keep shattering all norms. So there was a lot of people stuck in this civility mode. And we saw that with the top of the Democratic Party almost uniformly, like, well, don't do that. It's like, yeah, if a rabid dog is running through my house, biting members of my family, me saying, rabid dog, don't do that, is not going to do anything. But people also, it just, the whole thing, because of who runs the show in Hollywood and media, what Trump was saying and proposing and doing was removed from them. It just wasn't quite
Yeah.
real.
Yeah. So we are in a different media environment than we were in 2016. Although I do think the same people that are there keep doing the same things, right? Mainstream media going to mainstream media.
In some cases, it's worse. Yeah, agreed.
Agree. But we are having some momentum and different strategies occurring in the Harris-Walz campaign. Now, personally, I think in some ways that's because they're so pleasantly boring. Like, that I it's funny because I've considered myself like I'm a free speech absolutist for a long time in my life, and I am pro journalism, but also I'm like, don't do any interviews. Fine. Like,
No, I completely agree with you. I'm the same way, and I'm really torn because a lot of my career, like a fair amount of my career, I've done media criticism just straight up, and
Yeah.
like watching, many institutions that I've worked at or cared about or known people at get set on fire by, private equity and then destroyed. It's like, I don't like going after the media, but at this point, it really has to be done because it's really a huge indictment of the industry that we're now nearly a decade into covering this dude, and you are all still making the same mistakes of scale and volume and context. The word context, what I think about a lot in terms of the media coverage of Trump is, or the media coverage of the world in general, but the Trump show is an X-ray daily of what the media is still getting wrong. Proportion and context. Proportion and context. I wrote a book about power dynamics within the media in Hollywood because I wanted to provide context. Every story I've ever done about misconduct, misuse of power, I could have done the crappy 2,000-word hit job piece that would have had still the same grabby headline, but it wouldn't, to me, it wouldn't have provided what amount of this person's behavior contextually was enabled and driven by the so-called norms that they came up with, and that I would like to hold everybody to account here, because it's not just Trump, it's not just this one guy, there's a whole structure here. Let's put these things in context. But, I don't know if your brain is as broken by both sides as mine is, but it's still broken by this. It's like, I I loyally subscribe to the New York Times, and I've worked for them. I've done pieces for them. I've had wonderful experiences writing for them. But the fact that I remembered literally getting the physical paper right before the 2000, the Clinton-Trump election, and I'm like looking at that front page and looking at the coverage of Hillary's emails, and I'm like, guys, I'm not saying that's not a story. Proportion. You are giving this a much larger proportion because you want these two things to be equal. Proposing fascist sounding, extremely terrifying and discriminatory policies versus could have had better email security. That those are two different things. And why are we still so bad at proportion and context in the media anymore? I don't understand.
Well, I feel like we're in a moment of opportunity for progressives in a similar way that we're in a moment of opportunity for a lot of journalism or journalists or people that want to cover politics. I'll just kind of disentangle journalist from people who want to write about politics. In that we have seen the profession of journalism literally decimated. Literally the whole 10, was it that one job out of 10? I mean, the numbers are grotesque.
And if I may just quickly interject,
Yeah.
people who say, well, the media is not covering, I'm like, what media?
Yeah. Right.
It's not doing it's not covering the thing that you want. Yeah. So what you think of as media is something that was frozen in your mind in 1994. That's gone, friends. It's just
Yeah.
not there anymore. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
And it's, some of it is invisibly gone. Like the institutions things like Newsweek, which still exists, but it's kind of like a right-wing washing.
Right. The Chicago Tribune still exists and still employs people, but it's like literally a tenth of what it was when I was there.
Yeah, literally. And I used to write for CNN Opinion. CNN Opinion now does not exist. I will never get paid my last paycheck because I forgot to file it on time. And so we're seeing the outlets disappear. We're seeing the number of employees there, disappear. And we're seeing, God help me, newsletter economy happen, which I'm not a fan of. But there is like this opportunity in that the erosion of mainstream media, in that a lot of journalists are having to look at different ways of being in the media. Some of my friends have actually just left, which is kind of sad. A really good journalist I know, I won't name names, but someone whose work I really admired is now just like, he has kids to raise.
I can't tell you, especially in entertainment journalism, which, people think that that's not a thing. It's like, oh, you just get to go to parties. I'm like, yes, that's only what I do. I wear a tiara. I say I'm from Vanity Fair and I only go to parties. Like, no, it's like a lot of people from my neck of the woods go into PR and I don't, or marketing, because they're allied fields. And, I don't blame people at all. A lot of my friends have done that. And I'm like, no shade. I personally am like, I'm writing books is the way I write money. I do journalism for kicks now,
I've always said, if I'm willing to sell out for the right price, I have a price. If someone would just come and back up, you know what? Maybe if RT would come up and like,
I'm right here. I've been doing this for a minute. You too. Like what?
Yeah.
You couldn't even call? Nothing? An email? Wow.
I think that I wanted to kind of take this back to the specific example of this election.
Absolutely.
I think one of the things that's happening is, it's not that like, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are better TV that they're winning, right? In some ways, I think they're strategically boring. But something that I guess we had earlier this week talked about how in the right-wing media sphere, ideas get sucked up and amplified by like Trump himself and JD Vance themselves. The Haitian immigrants thing is an example. And that happens less so on the left or among progressives. But I think one thing you are seeing is a more selective kind of willingness to draw up these ideas from, let's say, the base, right? Like it's in fact, in the Discord for my science fiction podcast, we do have politics discussions, and we do have a channel called Based Kamala.
Right? Well, and that's the thing is, I have to say, I'm completely serious about this. Finally, absolutely finally, you are not, for so long, the political establishment anywhere left of, basically Viktor Orban, like in this country, anyone, the top tiers of Democratic and political leadership, in the non-Republican sphere, call it that, they have been so deeply averse to taking the fight to the other side. They are the media landscape has changed, and putting out killer memes before the debate is even over. That should have been the game in 2016. It should have been the game in 2020. Whatever else you want to say about Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden, and we could talk about them all day long. I'm not saying who they are as politicians or people. They're from the 80s and 90s mindset. Anna, they just did not understand. I mean, I'm not 25, but like I understand the media ecology that we're in now. We've had to adapt so many times, right? I had a podcast for Sci-Fi Network too. You know, like
How did
I like
I not know that? We were
it was a long
podcast
time ago. Yeah.
siblings.
Yeah,
So
we were
I was gonna say, I
podcasting.
think Gen X code switches really well in terms of like what we understand about the media, right? Like I am not a native speaker to the tick and talkin', right? And
I
whatnot.
still don't have a TikTok. I'm like,
I
God bless all of you. I look at your TikToks when people share them. I
I
don't.
see them on Instagram like all
Yeah.
people over 40 do, right?
Right. Of course.
Uh,
Like a normal person. Exactly.
but I do think that we can see when it's going wrong at the very least. Like I think a lot of us were frustrated. I think of Tim Walz and Kamala Harris as honorary Gen Xers, to be totally honest.
I
Um,
totally do. Yeah.
I think that they total I see them, and I think what they have done that's interesting to me is that they are bad television, good memes, and have two different ways of being unflappable. Kamala Harris has the prosecutor,
Mhm.
laser focus, and the ability. God, it was like watching. Um, I don't know, The Verdict, one of my very favorite movies. To see a prosecutor, or in that case, a defense attorney, but to see a lawyer just go chip, 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 chip,
I
at a
watched that
witness.
debate and I thought I was going to be throwing up from anger. And I was literally jumping up and down at a certain point because, like, she's doing exactly that prosecutor thing of like, I'm going to make my case, but I'm also going to jab you and then jab you again.
Yeah.
I know where your sensitive spots are. I'm going to hit it just right so that I'm not only, and she didn't get into the weeds with stuff she didn't want to address. She had an absolute laser focus and it was beautiful to watch. But yes.
And then Tim Walz has football coach, lunchroom monitor energy about it, right? It is
But
like,
also, don't you find what so I agree with totally? He's like the Friday Night Lights dad that everybody wants. There was just a footage
yeah,
from the Chick and the Talk the other day that someone posted. Shannon Watts, I think, posted Tim Walz talking to some young men at a reception, and they were so clearly just like, this is the father figure. They were like, we were all undecided, but now we aren't. I'm like, God bless that he can reach these. Like, look, when I was 20, I was a dumb white chucklehead. Like I'm not dissing these dudes. I'm saying I wasn't that probably that different from them. But what Tim also has is, and this is something I really love, and he has white man armor, right? He has Midwestern dad, normal dude, white man armor. He's not trying to triangulate and be something he's not. He's not, like Don Jr. wearing a hunting shirt, posing with a fucking animal. I'm sorry, probably shouldn't
oh,
swear,
you
but
can curse all you want.
oh, okay, thank God. So Tim is using that armor and doing something that I believe is truly incredible. Truly incredible. I mean, the Kamala stuff that she's doing a great job of exactly what you just described. But we all know, as a Black and South Asian woman, there's stuff she can't do.
Mhm.
She can't be angry. She can't get needled in a certain way. She can't like. So Tim is filling that spot, and what he's doing is saying, this is something that, as someone, I guess, like I've watched the Democratic leadership do this my entire adult life, run away from what they say they believe. The merest pushback. Oh, well, I guess we don't believe that kids I mean, kids shouldn't be hungry at school. But I guess if you're going to propose something where kids are hungry at school, like, I mean, sure. I mean, yeah, we don't want to make anyone, like just the other day, Joe Biden said, well, I knew lots of people in the aughts, lots of Republicans who were pro LGBTQ, and I'm like, who? Like specifically, that what are you talking about? You are in some fantasy of bipartisanship that has not been a thing for a really long time. But what Tim Walz does, he won't be provoked by you saying, well, it's socialism. If kids are not hungry at school, that's socialism. And he just looks people right in the eye and says, I'm just taking care of my neighbors like I did back home in Nebraska. He's outflanking them by just saying, where I'm from, and growing up in a small town in Nebraska, being a square guy from the Midwest, everybody's really completely corny dad. I you can say that, sure. I've watched multiple clips of Tim Walz going on MSNBC before and after he was the vice presidential nominee, and he will meet that stuff head on. He won't shirk from it. He will say, sure, I absolutely did do that. I absolutely did coach or I did sign on as the faculty advisor for the, high school LGBTQ associate, which in the 90s, holy wow. So he will meet people head on, take what they've said and say, I'm going to reframe that as this is just how Americans take care of each other as neighbors.
What I love about that in particular is on trans and abortion issues, which is that he will say trans kids. He will say gender affirming care. He will say, like, yeah, we want to make Minnesota a safe place for people to get abortions. For people to get
Right? My entire adult life,
abortions.
Joe Biden hates that word.
Yeah.
He's an old school Irish Catholic. Look, I'm Maureen Ryan. Like, I know like 8,000 Joe Bidens. Actually, my brother used to take the train because he works for a law firm. So he would meet Joe Biden on the train from DC to New York or to Delaware all the time. And so, my brother's name is Tommy Ryan. And I posted the other day, Joe Biden's physically incapable of not hanging out with a guy named Tommy Ryan, like from the south side of Chicago. So he is that generation of politicians, but I completely agree with you. It's it's way overdue to have politicians say the words. Say the words. And I think what I've found in my career, which is this is going to be weird and hopefully not overselling myself, the more I am authentically myself, the more I am authentically, this is what, here's the case I'm going to make for why this situation was bad, why this workplace was bad, why this misuse of power was bad, why this television show was good or bad. Agree with me or don't agree with me, but just go out there, make the case, say it, and own it. The Democratic leadership for most of my adult life has not wanted to own anything. They just want to triangulate and do small ball. And again, I understand to some degree why Obama had to do that as the first black president. Like there was just, but it became a religion. It became a religion to just have focus grouped, tiny, tiny incremental, like, well, if we raise a woman today who wants to have ownership of her own body wants to hear that she has ownership of her own body. Trans people want to know that they are protected as trans people. I don't want to hear about how you're going to raise the earned income tax credit by 8.6%. That's not like that's fine. Go ahead and do that. we're kind of past that. People's fundamental rights have been taken away.
Yeah. So I want to start to wrap up, but I feel like I do want to get you on the incredibly, in your exact comfort zone, or at least where we haven't talked so far that I know is a comfort zone, which is television. What TV shows are resonating with you at this particular time with politics as it is? What are you watching that either feels good to watch or feels cathartic to watch or feels like something that you wish more people would watch?
Well, they just canceled it, which is the bane of our age, right? But there was a really, really fun, like, big swing of a show on Amazon called My Lady Jane, and
Oh,
it's very, very, very interesting because it's. I mean, I'm a big CW fan. Like, I loved the WB, the CW, the 22 episode soap opera. Give it to me, especially if there's a genre element. Look, if there's vampires and or superheroes and there's like love triangles, bring it. So what I thought was so interesting about it was it took the Protestant versus Catholic, you know, almost wars and still actual wars of the time, and transmuted it into this analogy of some people can shapeshift into animals and some people can't. And so the people who could shapeshift into animals were persecuted for this quality, which really doesn't hurt anybody else. But it was a very I'm a huge fan of genre storytelling, whether it's TV, film, The Expanse. I definitely want to come back and talk to you about that someday. But I love genre fiction that it takes something and uses this analogy. Battlestar Galactica was my big favorite. So it's using. I mean, I'm actually doing a Battlestar rewatch, and that's a show that just remains as relevant as could be. Not to, I promise I didn't come on here with the intent of hyping it, but because I believe that this proves that God is real, there's a Battlestar Galactica 20th anniversary convention in Chicago, my hometown, and I'm going to become the MC of it next month. So please, everybody, come out and hang out with us and be a complete geek. But what I
Do
love
you need a
about that,
panelist?
I'm telling you, I will propose your name, absolutely. But Ron Moore did such a smart job. That team creatively did such a smart job of taking post 9/11 America
Mm-hmm.
and refracting it through this lens of, oh, well, these robots are bad. Well, are they bad? I mean, I think that tying a big political analogy like that to some interesting analogy, that's my sweet spot as a viewer. So I really wish we were getting more My Lady Jane. But yeah, a lot of what I'm doing right now is rewatching stuff. So the other thing that's fresh, that's new, We Are Lady Parts. And what I love about that, it's on Peacock. It's an all Muslim punk band in London. And there's been this wave of shows that are, I call it sort of like political and not political at the same time. Because most of the characters on the show are Muslim, it's not a big deal. But it's extremely political in that the history of the portrayal of Muslims in American television and British television is historically, like, I'm trying to think of a word that's much worse than terrible. People have been stereotyped as terrorists and worse, and it's just been kind of bad. But it's this writer-director, Nita Manzoor. It's very funny. The first thing I want out of a comedy about a punk band is that it's funny, it's amusing, it's entertaining. There are love triangles, there's, crushes and good songs and fun and adventures. But yeah, so I mean, I would say that's not perhaps the way that We Are Lady Parts or My Lady Jane, the way they're relevant is that a lot of people worked for a lot of years to point out to the highest levels of power in Hollywood that maybe white guys not making everything, maybe we could look into that. Like, what if a really smart, funny person who was not a 52-year-old cisgender white man, like, does anyone else have ideas? So cause part of that for me is driven by, I just get bored easily. And the fact that, like, an anti-hero man has troubles with women, I'm like, oh boy, we've never seen that before. So as a critic, I got very, very tired of that rut. And so David Zaslav, oh, he's part of a wave of Hollywood that is reducing it to rubble, as our profession was reduced to rubble, unfortunately. But within that, you can still find stuff that's really good. Or rewatch Battlestar Galactica.
All right, we're going to talk more about Battlestar Galactica after we turn the cameras off.
Nice. Bring it.
This office is like decorated by my inner child, which is why I have Star Wars wallpaper and an Alien poster. And I'm actually
Alien. Love it so much.
Yeah. But for people who for people who care more about politics, we're going to let them enjoy the episode that we've already recorded. This is 90 Days with Ana Marie Cox. I've been talking to Mo Ryan, who's a contributing editor at Vanity Fair, television critic and author of Burn It Down, Power, Complicity, and a Call for Change in Hollywood. A reminder that we're counting down the elections, 45 days. Please check your voter registration. There are a lot of states where you have to register by the 30 days before the election. You got some time. If you're watching this on YouTube, comment, like, subscribe. It's all available as a podcast, wherever you get your podcast, rate, review, comment, etc. And we will be back. Thanks, Mo.
Thank you so much.
I have great respect for you. I have great respect for your tenacity, for the fact that you just don't give up. But Rod, you're fired.